we'll reach out to you and let you know, hey, we found this judgment. We need to know if it's actually your sellers or if it's somebody else. Do you want to communicate that to them, or do you want us to reach out to them? We typically have like a template email that we send out and say, hey, this judgment's shown up on the property. Is it yours? Somebody else's? And then we'll kind of handle it from there. And we will get that cleared up before closing. Seller figures go out. That's approximately about 5 to 7 days before closing. And that is from us to the buyer's closing. So like if the buyer is working with Wasker, we will get the seller figures ready and we'll send it over to the closer at Wasker. We'll kind of balance and make sure that we're good. And that's kind of how that works. Final closing statement to review. That's usually a day or two before closing. We will actually send you over the draft CD to review it. This is something that we need you guys to review as soon as possible. That way we can get it back to the closer and then they can get us the finals. I usually like to have that done a few days before closing, but every closer is different and every lender is different depending on what's going on in the background over there.
We'll usually tell you that we cannot get a CD until the lender has sent their numbers to their closer. So let's say your lender, we have a buyer, their lender is Northwest Bank, they're using Wasker to close it. Wasker has to get numbers from Northwest Bank before they can send me anything to review. Again, the banks are like behind, everybody's kind of behind a little bit. So if it's a day before closing, you haven't seen anything, that is 100% normal. Tell your sellers not to panic, it's coming. And we're usually watching for it, but we can't get anything until the lender has things over to the closer. I cannot get a final until the lender has issued their document package to the closing company, which we also do closings. And I will tell you that we have gotten them the morning of closing and we're literally getting CDs at closing time. So if you set that expectation ahead of time, usually that kind of helps a little bit, but it's not unusual for us to not get that. We're waiting on kind of the lender's side to get everything put together. Okay.
Seller documents signed. We usually like to do that a week or so before closing. And then that's the only time that we will typically reach out to your sellers, is to set up a time for them to come into our office and sign seller documents with us.
I want to talk about that too. Expectations. Those two expectations are very important. That the CD will come late. Right? It's always okay if we get the CD 5 days ahead of time, like, oh great, it came really early this time. But make sure your sellers are aware we might see that CD the day of closing. Okay, give them not worst case, but give them expectations that this is a last minute thing. It's always a lot easier to say, hey, we got it a day early, we got it 2 days earlier. And it's more comforting that way, as opposed to, hey, we should generally have it 3 days ahead of time, and then we don't get it until a day ahead of time. Then they're on edge a little bit, like when you said it was going to be 3 days. Why is it only 1 day? Is something going wrong? Is something happening? Give that. Hey, we're seeing CDs come in the day of in some cases. So whenever we get it, we'll get it to you. Second thing is, when they send it to us, right, to review that CD, what should we as agents be looking for? All right. The first thing I look for is the Weichert fee on there, right? They're really good at getting it on there, but I always just double check. Is that 275 seller fee on there, right? Is there an HOA and is that prorated? I questioned Sarah last week and she was on top of it, made me look like an idiot, right?
She's like, it's a rich one.
I know. That's okay. She snuck it in there though.
Right,
that's hard to find.
What I thought was a normal spot, it wasn't there. Right. It was in a different spot. But we're communicating. At least we were thinking of it, and Sarah was on top of it, got it back to me right away. But if I don't ask that question and it fell through the cracks, then we get to closing and there's no 200 or whatever it was, and then my seller's like, hey, where's that credit? And then then what do you do? Do I take that out of my pocket? That's probably what I do, because I don't want to upset the apple cart and go back to the seller, right, or go back to the buyer because I need more money. So yes, I missed it, but I was looking for it and it wasn't there. So that's another case though, where sometimes depending on who the closers are on the other side, it might be put in section J, it might be put in section H, it might be in different sections. So those are some things. Also, is there something else that is unique about your closing that you know that money should be changing hands shown on the seller disclosure? It's easy to send these ladies a question. Hey, I don't see this. They're not going to be mad at you. Sarah wasn't pissed at me, right, when she sent back, hey, it's right here, right? It's okay to ask those questions. I'd rather have you as an agent ask those questions, and they would too, rather than not bringing it up and assuming that it's there and be like, well, I don't see it, but I'm sure they're smarter than I am. They got it, right? They are smarter than us, but if it's not there, then we have those issues at closing, right? So anything that's unique, the closing costs, all right, closing costs, the fee to Weichert, and an HOA proration, anything like that is my go-tos, right? But then anything outliers that your deal might have that's different, also you can look at and just confirm.
I'll tell you one of the things we're seeing right now, obviously with the rates, we're seeing a lot of rate buy down, and it's part of the closing cost. But what the lender has to do is take, let's say you agreed on $5,000 closing costs, but the rate buy down is $3,000. They are having to like split those out a little wonky, and we don't actually know there was a rate buy down. Like it was never negotiated to us. Like it was just on the buyer side, right? So then we don't know. And we just had one, we're still arguing over it. I think it was like $4,000. Everybody signed a form that said it was $4,000 rate buy down. That form never got passed to Integrity as the closing company. We had no idea there was a rate buy down, none. And the lender sent us too much money, so we didn't balance, right? Well, we did balance because what we had was what we thought it was going to be. The lender forgot to take their $4,000 rate buyout out, and now everybody's fighting over who's responsible for the $4,000. The seller's refusing to pay it, even though we signed the form agreeing to it. But we never had the form. The agent knew about it. Both agents did because it had to be signed and sent off, but we literally never got it. So we didn't know anything about it. So now we are having to front out money that we didn't know about just because that's how we are. But anything like that you guys know about, but rate bite downs especially, they're kind of like falling through just because it's side negotiated. So if you guys hear about that, just letting us know, hey, I think there's a rate bite down out there, or hey, the closing cost changed. Any of that kind of stuff helps us for sure.
Do you ladies want the invoices for a home warranty as well, or do you just want it on the seller's disclosure? I'm sorry, do you just want the notification that it's there? Who wants to see that?
We have to have an invoice for the home warranty.
For the closing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you just stick it in the loop even and just let us know, hey, the home warranty invoice is in the loop, or we'll always go look for it because we need it.
When we're listing the buyer, I always say it's the buyer's responsibility unless they drop the ball, right? I always believe that the buyer's agent should be responsible for the home warranty that they requested for a specific company. Sometimes it doesn't work like that.
I'll say sometimes everybody's different. I feel like with that. Sometimes we order it, sometimes buyer's agent orders it. It doesn't matter to us at all.
Yeah, we do have to have all the invoices. So anything that's paid out on the seller's disclosure has to have an invoice. So if you're negotiating on your inspection addendum that the seller's going to pay $3,000 for the windows to be fixed, I have to have the invoice directly to the window company. I can't just throw $3,000 to the buyer on there. So I've got to have invoices for everything. And anything over $5,000 usually lenders don't want on there. So a heads up for you.
And double check your commissions too, please. We're not perfect, so we can make mistakes, and sometimes our software isn't always on top of it. So just make sure you're double checking your commission as well.
Again, why it's very important to get them sales worksheet, because if you're negotiating your commission, everyone's not 6%. If you're moving your commission at all, they aren't mind readers. They don't know that you negotiate your commission.
Yeah, so that's another reason. If you check your commission and you're like, oh, this is way too much. Well, we didn't know. So just let us know and we'll update it. And it's not a big deal.
Two things. You may have negotiated your commission, or earnest money is a part of it. As new agents, that always confuses agents, right? Yeah. When we're the listing company, we hold that earnest money on the seller's disclosure. I think there's a standard way to do it. Sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes you see a dollar amount, you're like, that's not all the commission. Well, if you have $2,000, $5,000 sitting with Weichert in the trust account, that money technically stays with us, and then they send the rest of the money. So that's something to consider. If you have questions and you feel stupid about it, you just give me a call. I'll walk you through it. But these ladies can walk you through it.
Yeah, if you ever want to walk through like a closing disclosure or anything from like a lending standpoint, or just what it looks like and how we get those numbers, just let us know. We're happy to walk through that with you. But typically on a closing disclosure for commission, you will see full commission, and then it takes it out on the back end. So you typically won't see that earnest money number out. It'll be the full commission. So just if you're thinking through that.
So that's why the check may not match, right? So let's say $6,000 is the commission on the selling disclosure, the closing disclosure, and then you pick up a check for $4,000 and you're like,
what am I missing?
Sitting in our trust.
Yep.
You said the sellers come to you guys. Can that be done remotely if they've already left?
Yes. So we have the remote online notary. We have several options for that. We have a remote online notary program now, which is awesome. That program does charge me. So it's $75 to use it. We have 2 people in our office that can do that. It takes like 5 minutes. They send in an email. Max sends them an email to adopt their signature. They click on it. They have to have a video camera. They verify who they are. They click sign and it's done. So we have that option. If you're not tech savvy people, we have older people. We can always email to them. They can print it off, sign it. We give them clear directions on like what to notarize and how to do it. We send them a FedEx label to send it back to us directly. And then we'll get it off to closing from there. So we've got several options that we can do if we have a
that is an expectation deal too. When you're listing, talking about the listing, listing presentation, signing docs to list a house, two things I want to give very clear expectations on, right? One, we work with a third-party partner called Integrity Settlement Services, all right? And one of the partners from there will be reaching out to you. If you have any concerns on someone reaching out to you, let me know and we'll confirm it. But they will be reaching out to you through the process, and then to finalize, you will be sitting with them to sign your final closing documents. Now they're not thrown off when one of these ladies gets a hold of them to schedule a time. Because again, it's easily, if you don't give the expectation, it's okay. It's not like they're going to be upset about it, right? But it's a lot more comforting when Sarah reaches out and says, hey, it's time to sign closing docs, and they know what's coming, as opposed to them saying, why isn't my agent signing with me, right? So make sure that that expectation is there. And then you're right, Megan, if you know that we're listing a house and selling a house that they're going to be out of town, give that expectation that, hey, we're most likely going to be able to utilize an e-notary service that does have a charge, but it's a lot more convenient to you rather than overnight. So we'll get there when the time comes, but there is an e-signature notary service that we will probably utilize for this closing. Two things that are easy to make part of your listing presentation that help smooth it out, and it makes it a lot easier for these ladies, so they're not having to explain who they are or what goes on. Right.
Yeah, and let us know ahead of time too. If you have somebody like, okay, these guys are going to want to sign remote, then we don't send them the email, hey, you need to come in, and then they're like, oh, I already told my agent, so just makes it look like we're all on the same team. And it's a much better process for everybody.
Probably an email or
on the sales worksheet.
Yep.
Things that help your listing closer. These are we've already gone through a few of these things, but price changes, addendums, closing date, anything that changes the original terms of what you sent me, let me know as soon as possible. That way we can fix it up and make sure it's right. We do have in .loop a task list. So you'll see that if you scroll down to the bottom of your loop, you will see our task list. And you can see that at any time. Anything that is grayed out is already done. Anything that's still sitting there, you'll see when we expected to follow up on it. And one of the things that's in there is usually just kind of like checking on the file, double check the pricing with the agent and things like that. So any of those changes are very helpful to us. Again, sellers that live out of state, that's kind of just what we talked about. If you know you have a seller that's not here, let us know early, and then we all look like we're on the same page. Sellers' marital status, have a lot of divorces. That's a lot of what we do. If you know that it is a divorce ahead of time, let us know. We have sellers that literally cannot be in the same building at the same time, cannot be on the same email. All you got to do is let us know, and we'll coordinate that differently. If they have a pending divorce, super important to know, because if there's a divorce decree, it's going to come up in your title commitment. So a lot of times we have sellers that are angry at us because I don't have to do this. Why do I have to do this? There are, it's a marital house, so there are settlements that have to be paid out. So one seller gets so much money, the other seller gets the other. You let us know that ahead of time. The expectation is clear. Everybody knows. There's no question. Child support, get it every time. The kid's already 25 years old. It was never released. Child support recovery does not release a child support payment. Okay, so it's going to pull up in title forever and ever until it's released. We can have our attorney draft that release for them, but it has to be released. We cannot close without it. So if you get that seller that says, hey, what is this? Why do I have to do this? That's why. Okay. An estate versus a trust, two different things, completely different things. A lot of sellers will have their home in a trust. So it'll say Sarah Bartine Trust. That is fine. I just need to know that it is in a trust. All the documents have to be signed by the trust, by Sarah as the trustee. Okay. And they'll sign all those documents the same way throughout. An estate, obviously somebody has passed. We now have an estate, and it has to have an estate attorney involved. Okay. There's a difference between estates and probate, all that kind of stuff. So if somebody passed away without a will, we now have a probate. That is a much longer process. It's an estate. Everything was already set up. That's super easy. We have to work with the estate attorney. Okay. So if you have an estate, we just need to know who the estate attorney is. If they do not have one, Ross Barnett is our go-to. He actually got into doing real estate law because he was an estate attorney and figured out that the two weren't matching very well. So now he does both. So if you have a seller that needs somebody, we can always pass them along there. With the estate, there has to be an authority to sell. The court has to give authorization to the executor, all that kind of stuff. So if you know right off the bat that it's an estate and you want us to help kind of line that process up right when you list it, once it's sold, we're already set. Nobody has questions. Okay, we have run into that before where we don't have the authority to sell and now closing's delayed 30 days because we're waiting on the court. Okay.
From a buyer standpoint, does that matter to you as well?
Like if the buyer.
So like we've got, knock on wood, we've got one.
Okay. Yep. So we just want to check with the listing side and make sure, have you already started the process with the estate attorney? Do we have the authority to sell? And you'll want probably confirmation that they have that authority to sell. Yeah. That way you know that there's not going to be any delays for your buyer. Yeah. Yep.
How much longer does probate take? I'm just thinking like closing costs.
Longer.
Closing time.
If nothing has been started, it could take a while depending on assets, depending on if there's children involved. We had one, what was that? It was like Stewart or something, and somebody had passed, it was in an estate, and then randomly the ex-wife from 30 years ago came out and said she was supposed to get money, and then she had kids that expected money, and then the actual kids were fighting the stepkids, so it was like 6 months. We had to reopen probate because she was never named in anything. So probate could be 3 to 6 months, could be longer, just depending. But if it's an estate and everything's all set up, it should be pretty smooth. So, yeah.